As we begin 2025, we can look forward to the submission of NDCs, nationally determined contributions, which set out countries' climate change targets. The Climate and Clean Air Coalition and its partners have made important strides since NDCs were first submitted in 2015 to expand the inclusion of short-lived climate pollutants like methane and black carbon. We currently have 7 new updated NDCs submitted for this latest round that allow us to see if there are any clues as to whether short-lived climate pollutants continue to play an important role within NDCs. What we're looking for when countries submit NDCs in relation to short-lived climate pollutants is whether they are setting ambitious provisions within NDCs on short-lived climate pollutants, ambitious targets, ambitious mitigation actions, whether those actions are realistic, and importantly, whether they are additional to reduction in greenhouse gases. We do not want short-lived climate pollutant mitigation to be a substitute for the important task of reducing carbon dioxide and other long-lived greenhouse gases. We want it to add to it. Where better to start with these new NDCs than in Brazil, who submitted their updated NDC ahead of COP29 and who will host all countries who will submit updated NDCs in Belém at COP30 in November. Brazil's NDC commits to a 59 to 67% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2035 compared to 2005 levels, and importantly does so with some provisions that will ensure that short-lived climate pollutant mitigation is a major component of it. Indeed, one of the national mitigation objectives included in Brazil's updated NDC is to implement actions that reduce non-CO₂ greenhouse gases like short-lived climate pollutants like methane and black carbon to achieve reduction in warming. They importantly also highlight the importance of their mitigation actions achieving other goals, achieving co-benefits, including the reduction of atmospheric pollution. With air pollution rising up the table of global health risks, mitigating climate change by reducing short-lived climate pollutants can achieve local benefits in Brazil and in many other countries if those actions that reduce air pollutants and short-lived climate pollutants at the same time as greenhouse gases are prioritized. We then move on to the United Arab Emirates, who recently held a conference of parties in the UAE. They commit to a 47% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to 2019 levels. And one of the really encouraging signs I think we're seeing in some of these updated NDCs is more detail on how those greenhouse gas targets will be met in different sectors. And this points to where short-lived climate pollutant mitigation can make a really large difference. In the United Arab Emirates, they set sectoral pathways to achieve that 47% reduction in overall greenhouse gas emissions. This includes a 39% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, which obviously includes a large component of methane, and a 37% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from the waste sector, also a major methane source. Not only that, but the UAE specifies specific actions they will take to achieve these sectoral reductions that will reduce short-lived climate pollutants. For example, they have targets to increase waste diversion to reduce methane emissions by avoiding organic waste going to landfill sites in the first place, an 80% diversion rate by 2031, as well as promoting waste-to-energy projects. ADNOC, the state-owned oil company, aims to be net zero by 2045 and is investing $23 billion in provisions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including methane, having zero routine flaring and other provisions to reduce methane emissions. If we move on to Switzerland's nationally determined contribution, they commit to a 65% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990 levels. And again, we see this sectoral pathways to achieve those reductions, which point to how short-lived climate pollutants can contribute to achieving that goal. So a 25% reduction in agricultural greenhouse gas emissions by 2035 is part of that pathway. That will require reductions in methane as well as nitrous oxide to achieve that reduction. 33% reduction is in greenhouse gas emissions from waste. If we now look at Switzerland's nationally determined contribution, we see that they commit to a 65% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990 levels. And we again see the development of sectoral pathways, which is a real step forward in this round of NDCs. Not many countries outlined how different sectors would contribute to their overall greenhouse gas targets in the previous round of NDCs. And this allows us to understand a bit more the role that reducing short-lived climate pollutants like methane can play in achieving these overall greenhouse gas targets. For example, in the agriculture sector, Switzerland commits to a 25% reduction in agricultural emissions by 2035. This will have to come with a reduction in methane and nitrous oxide emissions, another powerful greenhouse gas. In the waste sector, a 33% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, predominantly methane, is committed to, as well as a 33% reduction in hydrofluorocarbons. So reducing short-lived climate pollutants is at the heart of achieving Switzerland's updated nationally determined contribution. The first updated NDC from Africa comes from Botswana. They commit to greenhouse gas reductions that are equivalent to about a 18% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions overall. And the important thing about Botswana's NDC is while they don't explicitly say that they're going to reduce short-lived climate pollutants or they're going to achieve air pollution benefits from implementing their NDC, because they are very specific about the mitigation actions that are included in their NDC, we can identify where those actions and where their NDC can help to achieve health benefits for their citizens, as well as reducing short-lived climate pollutants to reduce the rate of warming in the near term. So there are lots of measures in the energy sector expanding the use of solar and wind, energy efficiency, investing in public transport and shifting freight transport from road to rail. All of those will reduce the combustion of fossil fuels, reducing the emissions of air pollutants, as well as reducing carbon dioxide. They have specific actions to improve the diet of livestock, to reduce wildfires, which will reduce methane, reduce air pollutants at the same time. Enforcing vehicle emission standards, reducing HFCs in line with the Paris Agreement. All of these are part of the package that Botswana have put forward to achieve its greenhouse gas emission reduction and will implicitly reduce air pollutants and short-lived climate pollutants. In the last round of NDCs, we saw a lot of countries not explicitly making the link between air pollution and climate change or the centrality of short-lived climate pollutants to dealing with both of those issues, but implicitly committing to actions to achieve their greenhouse gas reduction targets in a way that would reduce air pollutants and short-lived climate pollutants. And that's what we're seeing with Botswana here. If we move on to Uruguay's updated NDC, it is all about the targets that they set. Uruguay has not set an overall greenhouse gas reduction target. They have admirably broken down their targets by individual greenhouse gas. There are only a few countries in the world that specify their greenhouse gas reduction targets in their NDC separately for different greenhouse gases. This substantially increases the transparency, the understanding that we have of how Uruguay will achieve its contribution. They set overall objectives, emission ceilings for carbon dioxide, for methane, and for nitrous oxide separately. This means we can look at their carbon budget separately for carbon dioxide, for methane, and for nitrous oxide. They set sectoral targets. 59% of Uruguay's greenhouse gas emissions come from the livestock sector, and they commit unconditionally to reduce the intensity of meat production, the methane emissions intensity of meat production by 35%, and the methane and the nitrous oxide emission intensity of meat production by 36%. They also commit to reducing HFCs by 30%. So we have a really clear set of targets in Uruguay as to how short-lived climate pollutants will be reduced, which are not a substitute for carbon dioxide because we have those targets there as well. At the end of last year, the United States of America submitted an updated NDC that committed to a 61 to 66% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to 2005. Importantly, the United States stated that in achieving that level of emission reduction, methane emissions in the United States would reduce by 35% from 2005 levels. That's a big step forward compared to their previous NDC that didn't state by how much methane would be reduced. They also highlight the investments being made that can lead to specific reductions in non-CO₂ greenhouse gases or short-lived climate pollutants. For example, investments in $1 billion investment in the Inflation Reduction Act to reduce methane emissions. Investing in climate-smart agriculture, which specifically involves better animal feeds, better fertilizers, use of biodigesters for manure that not only reduce the methane emissions from manure management, but provide you with a fuel that you can use as a resource. They commit to reducing HFCs, and they commit to clean transport, clean buildings, clean manufacturing that not only reduce greenhouse gases, but also reduce air pollutants. And finally, the United Kingdom submitted their updated NDC and committed to an 81% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990 levels. And here the NDC specifically highlights the link between achieving that greenhouse gas emission reduction and improving public health through improved air quality. The updated NDC of the United Kingdom specifically outlines how they will submit a clean air strategy or develop a clean air strategy that will show how air pollutant emissions can be achieved, promoting the right to health that is highlighted in the Paris Agreement whilst decarbonising. They specifically highlight the transport sector as a sector that is decarbonising in a way that will improve health because of the reductions in air pollutants that are achieved alongside it. On methane, they highlight the ambition to develop policies that will eliminate organic waste going to landfill sites, further reducing methane emissions. And the United Kingdom's NDC is a good example highlighting how subnational action can help to further decarbonisation. They highlight the air quality strategies being developed by the devolved entities within the United Kingdom in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and other jurisdictions that are helping to achieve air pollution reductions, improving public health in those areas, while at the same time reducing greenhouse gas emissions.